Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a very cool, very scarce French Trials revolver. This is a model of 1872 Galland, aka a Galland de Guerre, or military pattern, war pattern Galland revolver. Now this was developed by a guy named Charles-François Galland, and by the 1870s, model of 1872, by this point, he was a quite well-established, well-respected, and successful firearms manufacturer. The design that he is best known for, and that was most successful for him, was his model of 1868 Galland revolver, which is quite a distinctive gun. It's a 6-shot revolver that features a simultaneous ejection system, where there's actually a lever pinned under the barrel that comes down around the front of the trigger guard. You grab that, unhook it, pull it forward, and you can pull forward the whole cylinder, and there's an ejector ring, and it'll pull all the empty cases out and spit them all out at once. It's a cool system. It's visually very distinctive. There's actually a scene with Eli Wallach playing with one in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly that you might have seen. It's a cool gun, and it got some civilian sales. It got some military contracts. The Russian military in particular purchased them. They were made in a couple of different calibers. It was a good gun, but it was not good enough for the French military. So 1870, 1871, the French basically get their rear ends handed to them by the Prussians in the Franco-Prussian War. And there are a number of elements of military technology in that war where the French are decidedly behind the times. And so in the aftermath of the war, there's a significant move by the French military to rearm and re-equip with much more modern small arms. So they adopt their first metallic cartridge rifle, the Gras, in the years after the war. And they also look for a new handgun. Now, the French had adopted the 1858 Le Fachot. It was a pinfire 6-shot revolver. It was good for its time, but by the 1870s, it was definitely obsolescent, if not obsolete, in light of modern developments with metallic cartridge, center fire, double action, solid frame revolvers. Like, there were some really good revolvers starting to come out by this time. And not only did the French not have one of those, but they didn't actually have a whole lot of the Le Fachots. A lot of the French army in the Franco-Prussian War had still been using single-shot percussion pistols when they needed a pistol, and that's not good at all. So in late 1871, the French government sets up a commission to investigate revolvers, host a competition, find the best revolver out there, and adopt it for the French military. Now, there would be 4 particular revolvers of note that made it into this competition. One of them was developed by the Poteau, French arsenal at Poteau. That one got ejected pretty quickly. It just wasn't very good. There was an improved, updated center-fire model of the Le Fachot that was proposed in the trials. It was also rejected as being not really sufficiently durable. And then there were 2 major finalists. One of them was the Galland de Guerre, and the other was the Chamelot-Delvin model of 1871. Now, this doesn't have all that cool simultaneous extraction stuff that the 1868 Galland does, and that's because this French trial very specifically called for a solid frame gun. This French commission, they knew what they wanted, they weren't willing to cut any corners, and they wanted something really good. They had a pretty strict set of requirements for this trial. The gun had to be a solid frame, had to have both double action and single action capability. It had to have a rebounding hammer, which would mean it would be safe to carry with all 6 rounds loaded, with a round under the hammer. It had to have a solid gate loading system that wasn't prone to being bumped or displaced. It had to have an ejector rod that wasn't prone to being bent or damaged. It had to be accurate out to 25 meters, but potentially much longer than that, potentially 100 meters. Has to be reliable, it has to be durable, you have to be able to take it apart without special tools. Like, they wanted all of the good features of a revolver. And there were only 2 that really fit that bill by the time the trials got down to it. One of them was the Galland de Guerre. So Galland redeveloped a new gun with a solid frame specifically for this military trial. So let's take a closer look at it, and we'll compare it to the Chamelot-Delvin that ended up winning the trials and getting adopted. Personally, I think these are really good-looking revolvers. I think they have very nice lines, nice elegant lines to them, not too many frills, they fit the hand well, size is good. This is sort of peak European 6-shot black powder revolver sort of technology. If we take a quick look at the sights, they're actually pretty good. The front sight is this nice big semicircle. You can see it's dovetailed into the barrel there, so it can be set, zeroed, and then polished nice and flush. You can't feel the seam there at all. The rear sight is not exactly a solid V, but it's a nice large visible rear notch right there. So the whole gun is in the white. There are just a couple of markings that we can see. We have Galand Paris here on the barrel, but we actually have Belgian proof marks on the cylinder. So it may have been sold out of Galand's Paris location, but it was actually manufactured and proofed in Belgium. We have a serial number here that is 227 on this one. There are not a whole lot of these that were ever made. And that's it for significant markings. We just have a few other proof marks on some of the other components. Nice gun. It is a 6-shot revolver, double action or single action. So this is in double action here, or you can manually cock it to single action. It does have a half cock notch. Really, this is basically the carry safety. You put the hammer here, the firing pin isn't going to hit the primer of the cartridge in this top chamber, so you can carry the gun safely with all 6 chambers loaded. It's chambered for, speaking of which, 12mm Galand. If I open it up, if you look in there, you can see there's a really deep recess cut in the chamber, and that's because 12mm Galand had a really thick rim to it, and that cartridge would then sit fully recessed flush down in the cylinder. That's a really good, safe design. It means even if there is a problem, a failure in the cartridge case, there's no exposed brass out here, so you're not going to get any sort of venting shrapnel, even if your cartridge case fails. Ballistically, 12mm Galand is basically equivalent to the other 11mm/45 caliber black powder revolver cartridges of the day. We're going to be looking at somewhere in the 200 grain range for a bullet, traveling at about 600 feet per second, as best I can tell. Resources on this cartridge are very, very scant. Now, to load it, you would bring the hammer back to the half cock notch, flip the gate open. You can then freely rotate the cylinder. We have our ejection rod here. It clips up under the barrel like that. It's got a really solid, heavy lug around it there, so not going to be damaged. Lift that up, and then you can pull it back through each of the chambers to eject each of your empty cases. No spring here, it's just manually pull this back and then pull it forward. If you want to remove the cylinder, which is something that the French trials required, we have 2 squeeze clamps right here. Press those both in, and then we can just pull the center axis pin of the cylinder out. Open the gate, and the cylinder drops out, nice and easy. Now, one of the things that Galand was particularly specific about is he wanted to develop a gun that didn't require any extra tools to disassemble at all. And so that's why we have this lever here on the front of the grip. If I rotate this out, I can then just remove the whole grip like so. It's got a little hook right there, locks up into the top of the frame. We take this off, and now I have access to the mainspring right here, which I can very easily unscrew and remove. There we go. That screw comes out. The mainspring comes out. Of course, we have a side plate here. There's a hinge right there, and the side plate just lifts open like that. All right, and with that open, there's all of the lock work. It's really pretty simple. You've got your sear right here. You can see it hooks into the hammer there, and there's another small hook right there. That's the rebound or the half cock safety notch. Holds it right there. We have our trigger, which is going to push the hand right there to rotate the cylinder. And this lock work is actually less complicated than that of the Chamelot Delvine, but the parts for the Galand are more expensive and more complex to manufacture, even though the gun itself, once it's built, is simpler. So if we switch to the Chamelot Delvin, this is a model of 1873 infantry revolver. This is what was actually adopted over the Galland. We have a similar system of not needing special tools to disassemble the gun. I can pull out the access pin by pushing that button down. That allows me to pop out the cylinder. And then in this case, I have to unscrew this in order to open up the lockwork, but the screwdriver is actually the access pin from the cylinder. So as far as Chamelot Delvin was concerned, this fulfills all the requirements. Like, you don't need any special tools because the tool is part of the gun itself. Now, there we go. Pull that screw out. Now, from Galland's perspective, then we then have a little leverage notch there that I can pop that screwdriver into. From Galland's perspective, his system was better because it didn't require the tools in the first place, even if they were included in the gun. So we can pull apart the Chamelot Delvin here, and now I have a lever here that removes pressure on the mainspring, which makes this also quite easy to remove. So really good systems here. They're both durable, reliable systems. They both have 6 moving parts in the lockwork. The Chamelot Delvin actually has 1 additional spring more than the Galland, but really this is a case where the French Trials Commission was presented with 2 options that were really both very good. It's really not all that uncommon for a military trial to result in adoption of something that's not necessarily the best choice, because cost always plays a factor, and cost was really the only thing that the Chamelot Delvin had over the Galland 1872. These guns were both very rugged, very durable. They were both had very good simple lockwork, but the Galland was just more expensive to manufacture. The Chamelot Delvin had more thought put into making sure that it was efficient and economical to produce compared to the Galland. And so ultimately, the Galland is rejected. Galland's a little salty about this. He writes a treatise on military revolvers in 1873 that has a lot of digs on the Chamelot Delvin and is kind of an advertisement for his own gun. This pattern never does become particularly successful, though. Possibly just because of its costs. So surviving examples are pretty darn scarce. You saw this one has just a 3-digit serial number. So a big thanks to the viewer who loaned this to me to film for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.